So, my name is Nicholas Panagiotou, and as president of DCN Global and associate professor at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, I would like to welcome you in an event that we are more than happy to co-organize it together with Portulans Institute, Said Business School, as well as having and all these very distinguished guests and co-speakers with whom we will actually discuss a very important topic, a topic that it is one of the highest priorities in the Davos meeting that it is taking place these days as well, regarding trust in digital technologies. I will now pass the floor to the co-speakers of this event today in order just for a quick introduction of themselves. Roberto.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation, Nikos, DCN, and Portulans Institute. I'm Roberto Gelado. I'm a full professor at FEU San Pablo University in Madrid, Spain. And my main topic of interest and research lately has been disinformation. I'm part of the iVerifier Hub. I'm the principal investigator at my university within the conglomerate, and I'm really happy to be here and discuss this.
Thank you, Roberto. Teresa.
Thank you, Nicholas. Hi, everyone. I am based out of London, working for Global Counsel, a public affairs agency, mostly advising tech companies. Some of the biggest AI developers, we're helping them navigate regulation. And for that purpose, we've recently studied the impact of generative AI on trust and the future regulation which will come out of that. And we are very glad we could partner with Portulans Institute and contribute some of our research to this year's Network Readiness Index.
Thank you, Teresa. Bill?
Bill Dutton. I'm a social scientist. I was the founding director of the Oxford Internet Institute. I've retired from Oxford, but I work there as a fellow and at several institutes, and I direct the Portulans Institute, but I'm still based in Oxford. I've done a number of surveys on trust, and I'll talk about them, I hope, in the questions for the World Internet Project and also for the Oxford Internet surveys. And I helped author the report that you've been sent or have access to. Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Bill. Alexander?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexander Levote Sayad. I'm a researcher, professor, and journalist here in Brazil. I run an organization called ZeitGeist that works with media and information literacy, and also AI and its ethical impacts, which is my newest field of research. I'm a TV host here in Brazil, also on this field. So I'm very glad and happy for DCN Global and Portulans Institute and Said Business School for this invitation. I think this report of readiness is unique in the world, and it's being very useful for different approaches here in our area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Purple?
Hello, everyone. I'm Purple Romero. I'm based in Hong Kong. I'm a digital verification editor at AFP, where we help produce fact checks about disinformation in the Asia-Pacific region.
Thank you, Purple. And now we'll pass the floor to Rafael. Rafael is from Portulans Institute, and he will actually present the report that it will be followed up from a discussion with the speakers and with all of you. Thank you. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos. Well, my name is Rafael Escalona Reynoso. I am the CEO at Portulans Institute. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Network Readiness Index, some of the findings, some of the important topics that we discovered and uncovered this year. I will tell a little bit further during the presentation what Portulans does, mostly by the end of it. But before that, let's just begin with the presentation. So allow me to share my screen. Let me know if you can see the presentation.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's begin with explaining what the Network Readiness Index is. Hold on. All right. Actually, before that, let me just go through the points that we are going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about 3 parts. Well, this presentation is organized in 3 parts. What is the NRI and what the theme is of this year?
Rafael, I'm sorry. We
Yes,
are
yeah.
saying give subtitles a try. So if you want to turn it off, actually.
Say that again, please.
In between your presentations, we are just seeing something that it says give subtitles a try. I think it's like a pop-up actually.
I don't see that. Let's try to do this one more time then. Hold on.
Okay. It's like a pop-up that refers to providing subtitles actually during the presentation. I don't know.
Yes, I don't think I control that. If there's a recording on the side, I think that is coming from the control center over there. Let me try to begin with this one more time.
Okay, now it's better. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Apologies for that.
Yes, it's great.
All right, let me know when this is visible for everyone.
Yes, it is okay, I think, for everyone. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's begin talking about what the NRI is. So the NRI was created in 2002 by Professor Sumitra Dutta and Professor Bruno Lamban. And this was part of the World Economic Forum in one of the reports called the Global Information Technology Report. And this report back in the day, of course, was groundbreaking with the approach it had. And it was extremely important at the time. But after a few years, the World Economic Forum decided to not engage so much in this type of research. And there was this small gap in time when things began moving too fast. And in over 2 years, the NRI wasn't produced and was given back to Professor Dutta. And now we took over and we decided to make this a little bit more human-centric. We gave it a revamp. We revamped the index a little bit to capture more some of the things that needed to be updated, make it more human-centric. And of course, what we did is we tried to make it something that provides key metrics for the use of ICT, for development of it, and for its competitiveness. So this redesign happened right before the pandemic. So we encountered a series of things that we had to continue moving forward with and revamping every so often. So every year we do a revision of the index to make it more current and to make it what we call future ready. So the NRI, just quickly, the model is composed by 4 pillars: technology, people, governance, and impact. Of course, this is a mix of a series of indicators, including indicators that measure individuals, business, regulation, and of course, trust, which is one of the elements that we're reviewing today. So let's talk about what trust is exactly in this perspective. So the theme of this year is precisely this trust in a network society. And some of the findings that we have, we'll talk about them a little bit later on. But some of the main elements that we found this time around is that this network societies, trust is the foundation. Without it, the moving forward is very complex. And over the past decade, we've seen this erosion of trust that has been captured not only in perception, individual perception, but in numbers as well. And as we continue to grow, to be more dependent in technology, we have to make sure that this trust is not something that erodes completely the technologies or the development of theirs and the impact that they might have. So this becomes something extremely important as a measurement when we're talking about how to structure a tool that measures this type of technologies. So this
Rafael,
is
we are still seeing the first slide.
oh
Okay.
I don't know what this is happening. Can you see because this is moving in my presentation?
No. No, we're still seeing the first slide that it says what is the Network Readiness Index.
If you're working with several screens, maybe you're sharing the wrong screen because we can see the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Hold on. My apologies.
No
For
worries.
this. On my side, I can see
the topic is about building trust in technologies. So this is an element of how we can build trust in technologies.
Do you see anything moving right now?
No, not yet.
Let me try to reshare this one more time. We're gonna go to the slide we were at.
Great. If you want to move it to the next slide so we can see that it's changing, now we can see.
One second. Is it moving?
No, it's frozen into us. It didn't move. It didn't change actually.
What about here? Can you see it here?
Yeah, the theme of 2023, navigating the digital future.
All right, then we'll have to do this trick here. All right, can you tell me if this moves?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so then we'll have to do this trick.
Okay,
so this
thank
is
you.
where I was at. I was mentioning that trust is significantly shaped by personal experience. And we've seen this erosion over time, especially over the last decade, that has been captured not only by individual perception and anecdote, but rather by data as well. And as technology is moving forward, we see that there's this enormous potential to benefit, to create benefit in the use of these type of innovations. But these concerns are making the capacity of these technologies, the potential swamp a little. So the rapid advancements like AI, for example, biometric measurement, surveillance, and those types of things, the ease that these produce and individuals less exposed to this type of technologies, they're beginning to catch up with them is becoming an issue. So of course the media serves as a source of information here, and at some points we've noticed that the control of this type of information is vital for shaping public perception, and of course we've seen the distortions that has produced. So while we navigate through these challenges, we've identified a series of things that we can work with. Of course, the risks, and we've noticed that empowering the users can allow them to have a balanced perception on how to use these technologies and become a little bit more trustworthy on their outcome and their use. Now, our role is also to simplify some of these complex topics. Oftentimes, again, many individuals have experience, usually the younger generations, but some of the older generations or the, let's say, middle-aged generations still have a certain distrust on some of the digital assets that if, well-informed, this type of assets can help them produce, many benefits. So as technology continues to evolve, we have to create some sort of balance between these two things. And what the NRI is trying to do is to make not only governments, who are the main users, corporations and individuals, have another tool to make this informed decisions on how to balance these two things. So let's go quickly, because we've lost a little bit of time doing this technical assessment and revision of things. Let's talk about the rankings. What do we find in general? So we find, of course, that the high income economies rank as the top 10. Mostly we see them from Europe, the Americas, and Asia Pacific, being the US, Singapore, and Finland, the number 1, 2, and 3 respectively. China is the middle income economy, of course, to surprise of no one, that is closing the gap between the middle income economies and the high income. And then we see champions like Rwanda that lead among the low income economies and outperform in certain aspects, doing things that seem to be more closer to the high income group. Then, of course, we're talking about these 4 elements on the NRI: technology, people, and impact. And then we can see here the personalities of each of these pillars. We can see that technology, of course, is led by this juggernauts, the US, Switzerland, Hong Kong, as representing China. And then we find how people, this element that has this connection with the individual, is led by Korea, Israel, and Japan, while governance, which is the area that has trust as a sub-pillar, is led mostly by Northern European economies. Impact is a mix of things, of course, mostly European. And of course, we're talking just about the top 3. And Singapore, of course, leading. The income groups, as we mentioned, the high income group is mostly the top 3 and the top 10 in general. And we see China closing the gap, but we find important elements and important performance here, like Thailand, Brazil, and Indonesia, that are, they're becoming elements, or let's say players in the upper cluster of the NRI. Then we see African economies like Rwanda, Uganda, and Gambia doing top performing, rather, in among the low income economies, and Ukraine as the only low middle income economy in this upper half of the NRI. Now, of course, we can see the top ranking economies here per region, as most of them are not surprising. But we have to talk about something that we refer to as the overperformers, which is a concentration of economies that are doing much more with less. So as we see here, the high income economies are taking the top 50, 84% of it. But we see that there's other economies that are mostly non-high income and mostly low income economies are performing above their expectations, and they're doing so much more with less. There's a catch, of course, that we'll talk about in a few minutes, and probably we'll touch base on that during the conversation later. But regardless of that, we see this enormous efforts being made at the, let's say, the tail of this graph. Now let's go to the messages. This is, I think, the key of the whole conversation today. We have a series of seven findings, 7 messages rather, that are extremely important. And with this, I will close my conversation today, and then we'll go to the interesting part again. That's the round table and the conversation we'll have. But let's talk about this. And I think I gave a few preambles before. The number 1, of course, is that trust is the element that glues this interconnected world. Without it, we've seen that the architecture of this whole systems begins to crumble, and then trust becomes something that has been eroded for the last 10 years. And while we have seen this technology, or enormous advancements in technology, we see the same in trust. So we have to try to do this explain clearly in a way that's more clear that this is an element that has to be achieved with several ways. There are several ways of doing this, like what we're doing right now, having conversations on what the limits of this are. Now, there's the reason for this collective skepticism. Of course, as we've spoken before, over the last 10 years, we've seen a series of attacks on information, let's say, on reality of things. But besides that, we've seen the rise of many other technologies like AI and crypto that oftentimes are misunderstood, or they're moving too fast, and they probably are becoming, they make people get more skeptical and scared of them. So again, giving a little bit more of an explanation, giving them a human face is something that we've noticed that is something extremely important to achieve this trust. And of course, data collection is important to understand where the skepticisms are rising, and where to be more active on information and education on these topics. Now, we need to move past this perspective of concentrated, that's concentrated on harms. Of course, activities like, using this type of information and anything that's live online is something it could be dangerous, of course, like any other activity. But understanding the balance and the good parts of it, and the possibilities that come with this, is something that needs to be conveyed, and just make sure that we don't focus exclusively on this segment of harms and risks. So access, exposure, and skills, we believe, are the elements that need to be fostered the most in order to gain this trust. Of course, these depend on many factors beyond just having a perfectly well-tailored course online, or having an event like today's. But it has to do with age, of course, the experience, the exposure. So as everything in life, experience and exposure is something that is essential to break this type of feelings and defenses versus technology. So access, exposure, skills, and elements that can, or processes that can allow people to access this type of technologies is something that we think is very, very key to move forward. We need to demystify technology. Again, there are many things that we can do about this, many terminologies and many aspects that we are seeing rise in the last few years that, of course, add to this risk perception. And we have to make sure that we can work together to try to demystify these effects on technology. Of course, we have to make sure that there's appropriate governance behind these technologies. This is the importance of what Nikos was mentioning. The conversations in Davos right now with this respect are extremely key, especially with, of course, we know this is almost turning into cliche AI. But not only that, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and some other things that have to do with personal let's say, gains and savings and things that are very close to individuals' development. These types of things are very in need of governance. Of course, privacy, cybersecurity, all of those elements that have been discussed for years are things that are extremely important to revise right now with the new technologies. And lastly, trust and inclusion are very interconnected, and these things are, we need to make sure that this inclusion of individuals is something that is part of this information, this part of education, and this movement towards trust. So with this, I finalize the presentation. I will share this presentation with everyone that's attending here, and anyone that registered, or anyone that's interested in learning a little bit more. You can find here more about who we are as Portulans. We invite you to please check what we do. We're very involved in technology. We're very involved in innovation and human capital, and we're moving forward to the this connection between technology, innovation, and those aspects of society that will eventually create a better world for everyone. So with this, I stop the presentation, and let's continue with the conversation. So Nikos, back to you. Thank you again for the your patience, and the apologies for the technology that didn't really work that well from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rafael. I would just like to state here that that was made on purpose in actually to challenge our audience trust and belief in technology.
I think it worked.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. So having said that, I would like to start from you and Bill actually with the first question. And more specifically, I would like to emphasize on how does actually Network Readiness Index assess and measure trust within a network society, particularly in the context of technological advancements and taking into account actually what Bill mentioned before, the previous experience from the Internet Society as well. Bill, do you want to go first and then pass it to Rafael? Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably, okay, let me try to, it's not, the Network Readiness Index itself is not an indicator of trust, but we would expect that actually the vitality of internet use and adoption and so forth will be affected by people's level of trust. The key question is, how do you measure this? What is trust? How do you objectively measure it and define it? And it's, we don't ask people, do you trust the internet? Trust is a sensitizing concept. It combines many things, like, do you trust the information that you can get online? Do you trust people that you can communicate with online? Do you trust that a PowerPoint will work when you do? And so there are all these multiple dimensions. And what we generally do, Nicholas, is for years, we've been asking about these specific components. For example, the best example I would give is we ask about how confident are you that you can find good information online. I'm not sure that that's the exact wording, but yeah, confidence that you can get good information online. And it's very clear that Raphael mentioned personal experience is important. The specific finding is that the people who are most distrusting of the internet are those who never use it. So that you find that if you use the internet, you get a learned level of trust. So we know that we can use PowerPoints for remote meetings, but we know that sometimes it's a hassle. All right. There used to be a day when I was younger that doing a PowerPoint in the classroom was a problematic exercise. And then would your PowerPoint work on a computer? Well, and now it works, but yeah, will an online presence. So you have a learned level of trust in technology in various ways. The other thing, we ask people if they have bad experiences online, and we list a variety of bad experiences, and we find that the more, when you have bad experiences online, that does undermine people's confidence in the internet. So it's a balance of giving good experience to people, and also minimizing the bad experiences people have online, that we can maintain a vital level of trust in the internet. Raphael, you might want to add to that, or Nicholas?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Bill and Nikos for the question. So yes, so in addition to this, we do have I mean, the reality of things is the intermingling of all the indicators you know, can work together to produce some of the outputs that we have that we highlight right now as findings. But more precisely, even in the governance pillar, we do have a trust sub-pillar. And the indicators that we measure there are basically secure internet servers, cybersecurity, online access to financial accounts, internet shopping. And there are, of course, others in people and technology, and the people and technology pillars that are connected to these two and correlate to some extension. So the play between those indicators, if we want to go to the more technical, let's say more index related answer, is that we measure some of these concepts through these indicators. Of course, as Bill mentions, we try to develop new indicators and new measurements that provide more precise information. But this is how we try to do this. And by merging these two things, the information and this two from these perspectives, we can get the type of information that we're conveying and sharing with you today.
Having a panel consisted mostly from social scientists, that probably big proportion of our audience as well, if I may guess. I think that we all understand that difficulties that arise whenever you have to actually to identify issues like trust, which is a fundamental element, especially of our societies, and most importantly of our democratic institutions. Having said that, I would like to ask you a similar question, again, emphasizing in trust, because it is a very important topic in our nowadays. Raphael, if I start from you, you have shown some actually data regarding trust in different countries, like Cook in Finland, for example. Can we say that these elements of trust in digital technologies, among other factors, are related with the general trust that exists in societal level? Because you mentioned before, like, that there is a lack of trust whenever, as Bill mentioned, whenever people don't use actually internet. Can we actually say if the lack of trust or increased level of trust is related actually with other factors as well, trust in political institutions, etc.? Thank you.
Well, yes, there's a, I mean, if we go to the analysis of the data per se, then we can find these correlations. Obviously, there are many things that correlate, and we can find that some of the areas of trust, even within the indicators that I mentioned before, or some indicators that have to do with other either surveys or other findings by other researchers, there's always this correlation between these elements. Now, if I understand the question correctly and more into the let's say the philosophical part of it, I can say that, of course, there is a connection between those economies that seem to perform in the highest levels of the NRI and these levels of trust. You know, they have one thing that is key that I have to mention here as an element is governance. So we've noticed that those economies that have high levels of high rankings on governance seem to have better performance in what we define as trust in technology. And if you remember in my presentation, I mentioned this overachievers or overperformance rather. These economies are economies that in a degree less or in a path towards development, most of them not high income, we notice that they are doing a lot in technology, but then we find that governance seems to be one of the lower elements that they have as ranks and scores and whatnot. So coincidentally, those two things together become a very clear indicator that this trust is not necessarily going hand by hand with the development they're doing in technology. So those, if I can answer from the perspective of again the index and composite indicators, we notice that certain regions, particularly the regions that have these overperformance, seem to be the ones that have the least trust. And mostly it's due with this correlation of low governance performance. So I think that would be my answer in the short version.
Thank you, Rafael. Bill, if you want to actually expand the discussion about trust in technologies, and especially with the key findings from the Network Readiness Index,
Well,
what are the elements that you would highlight? Thank you.
Well, I would just argue, these are real big questions. I mean, we don't have a clear causal argument about some of these relationships, but generally, governance and technological development are related, but they're both related to GDP of a country. So those countries with higher levels of economic development tend to have more mature governance structures and also more technology for people to access. Most of the studies of countries in terms of trust are done within the country, but we find the same things in every country. That is, experience with the technology builds a level of trust. People who are non-users are least trusting. So you find that in the least developed countries, there's more uncertainty about technology because of this. They just do not have exposure to technology per se. But what's interesting is the narrative is very clear. There's a clear narrative going on about the internet is undermining society and undermining democracy, undermining well-being, undermining health information, what have you. And my concern is I think the narrative is detached from actual data. I mean, most people use the internet, have a fairly good level of trust in it. But for example, even social media, the people who are complaining about social media are most often people who have never used social media. And the people who are most frightened about AI are those who have never used ChatGPT or any other AI technology per se.
Or they still have in mind Frankenstein.
Yeah. The one caveat here is that trust is also not a linear thing. I mean, you don't want too much trust. If you have too much trust in a technology, you really want what I call a learned level of trust. You don't want blind faith in technology, or you make mistakes. You trust
Then
technology.
you might overpass actually the necessity to have control systems actually that it will safeguard these the freedoms or other major important things like personal data and stuff. I fully get that and understand. Teresa, if I move now, I would like to move to you and your organization contribution in Network Readiness Index, a short comment on the findings. And actually, I would like to respond to the following question. What role do transformative technologies, disrupting, I would say, even technologies, play in shaping trust levels within societies, and how this might evolve in the next decade? Thank you.
That's a very big question. I'd say let's start by breaking it down and thinking about trust as something that shapes the relationship between different actors. So in my field of work, we often think about the relationship between companies and governments and consumers and companies, because if there is a distrust between consumers and companies, often that creates the need for legislative action. So in the beginning of 2023, we started to think about how is generative AI different from the AI that we've previously seen, and will this new form of technology mean new regulation? And is that something that people demand? So we've conducted polling in the US, UK, and Germany, and it's quite interesting because in these three markets, we've found quite different levels of uptake of the technology, trust in the technology, and demand for regulation. Germany in there is a very interesting case study because it's known to be a country where the government is a bit more leaning towards the precautionary principle of regulating in order to prevent harm, rather than in the US, you would rather think about experiencing harm and then regulating afterwards. That's not always the case, but generally you can nail it down to that. Now in Germany, we found that there were big divides between the groups that we've polled in their trust in technology. Women were less likely to trust in generative AI. Older people were much less likely to trust in generative AI. And these were the people who demanded regulation most. And as previously said, that is partly because these groups of people might not have had access to this to this technology yet, and might have bad experiences with other technologies beforehand. But interestingly, the demand for regulation, even though the trust wasn't necessarily high, was quite low. And when we actually asked people about this and tried to figure out why, the reason was that the trust that the government would regulate this anyways was high. The trust that the government would do this well was low. And that was in a way different from, for example, in the UK, where people didn't trust the government to do what is necessary to prevent harm coming from this technology, but did trust that if regulation occurred, that would probably be something quite sensible, or something that wouldn't impact the industry. And so I would say that the impact of transformative technologies on society will be very different from who you ask and from the different subsections of society. If we say that, for example, some groups in society are more distrusting than other groups, and if we say, for example, women are less likely to trust a new technology like generative AI and are therefore less likely to use it, and we talk about a technology which will be increasingly adapted in the workplace and will get you ahead in your career, that could mean that a transformative technology without an equal level of trust in society will mean to a widening of inequality gaps that already exist across society. And I think this is where, then again, the relationship between the government and technology companies come in, where regulation is trying to reestablish that trust.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. And I think that the aspect of regulation is something that we will come back. I would like now to pass the floor to Alex for a short comment regarding the findings and give us a perspective of Americas. And then I would like actually to ask a specific question, but please go again. Please go ahead, Alexander.
Thank you, Nikos. Yes, first of all, there are some aspects that echoes here in America a lot. Always when I read the index, it's not the first time I go deep on that. It's the third year I think I'm reading and following your work, which I think it's amazing. The first one is indeed we try as you move forward with the concept of the index itself. We know that to work on governance with that needs to have a more multi-stakeholder approach, and sometimes interdisciplinary approach like we are having on this session here. And it's not easy to do in a practical way when you talk about a nation Sometimes when you talk about a nation, not even a ministry or a secretary is talking to the next door, to your next door fellow. And what happens sometimes in this distrust of technology in some countries in Latin America and the Caribbean is that the government itself takes for it the responsibility of regulate technology systems and information systems. And it makes just exactly what Teresa just mentioned. People start to not trust anymore on information and technology systems because it's kind of being manipulated by the government itself without including multi-stakeholder actors and other important parts of the society in this kind of regulation or this kind of governance itself. So I can give you example, a very explicit example in El Salvador, which is a small country in Central America that was living in a terrible crisis in a military government and try to regulate the technology system by the government itself. Of course, it's not a very successful experience, but at the same time, I can mention even here in Brazil what's going on. In an attempt of trying to involve a governance of solid governance of technology itself regarding the reliability of information, political interests are jumping in front of the actually ethical and the society interest in kind of regulating this bill that they are trying to approve on the parliament. So sometimes it mixes it up with several areas of the government itself or the society itself that make it a blur thing that's hard to engage people in trust in technology because of that. There are, and it's a very powerful way to manipulate narratives, as Bill said, and to manipulate also conspiracy theories about things that are going on regulating technology. So this is an aspect in Latin America and the Caribbean that needs to be underlined.
Thank you, Alexander. Now, having said that, I will move to purple in order to have a different view, another view from another part of the world. But I would like actually to ask immediately after both Teresa and Purple and Roberto regarding examples of regulatory framework that actually impacted in regarding the trust that people place in technologies. Thank you. Purple, the floor is yours.
Well, I was listening earlier to Rafael explain the results and the primary findings of the NRI. I was just there were two things that actually struck with me, and they are related to access and exposure. Because it's a good thing that you can see an increase in access and exposure, especially among low, well, I would say developing countries in our part of the world. But having said that, it's also a double-edged sword coming from the perspective of fact-checking. Because actually, to produce misinformation, you don't need a sophisticated level of skills or knowledge in using this technology. As long as you can access it, as long as you're exposed to them, then you can produce misinformation and then spread them and distribute them. The kind of misinformation we see here and that we deal with is the kind of misinformation that an old person can actually produce with a click of a button. And the spread happens through very personal communications like a WhatsApp message. And then it's propagated on social media and then it spreads like wildfire. So while it is good that almost everyone can access and are already exposed to technology, particularly social media, there's also that concern that, again, it can only help bad actors to produce more misinformation. And unfortunately, efforts to counter those are still in the stage of catching up. So it's like we would like to be more proactive, but as of now, efforts can be made more proactive, but as of now, we're still, I think, more on a reactive level, although they can be improved. So that's one point that I would like to raise. And then other one is this, when you say exposure, like they're being exposed to technology, but then they're also being exposed to different kinds of information. But then the variety of information, it still opens the question of what kind of information and from whom. Because some parts of Asia, the information is coming from the government. The state has control over social media and then media. So if you're only getting information from those in power, what kind of information are you actually getting? So let's say you can now access all kinds of social media because it's for free, because you have free data. But if can only still go through websites whose information are produced by state actors, then what does this do to you in terms of, trusting institutions? So yeah, I think those will be my main takeaways from this one. And I would say that diversity and variety of information are good things that these developments are able to produce, but quantity is not always quality. And so I guess, yeah, those are things that we have to keep in mind, especially from the experience coming from our region.
Thank you, Purple. Roberto, a short comment on the findings as well as giving an example of regulatory practices that contributed actually in strengthening the trust or building trust around digital technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikos. Yeah, I feel that the regulatory framework usually takes time to build trust because it's something that the societies move very slowly towards. I was very attracted by some results of the report, especially in my country, in Spain. There's been several regulations or attempts to regulate content online, and in 2020 there was, for instance, a new law on trustworthy electronic services that came into force, and it was mainly focused on boosting trust in e-trade and all kinds of transactions, but also to build trust between customers, clients, and businesses. And in the report, I've just seen that Spain ranks today in 2023, well, last year, 2023, ranks first in the e-commerce legislation within the governance pillar. So there might be things that regulation can do to boost this confidence. That's actually the only ranking, the first rank, the only section where Spain ranks first, along with the internet access in schools and women's economic opportunities. So it's very significant. There's been also some more recent attempts whose impact I fear that we haven't had time to see in society. In 2022, there was a new Broadcasting Act in Spain that included for the first time specifically a section on media literacy, which I think is key. And this is one of the things that we have sustained at iVerify, the hub funded by the European Commission that I am part of to fight disinformation, because it has been mentioned in several comments of the participants before. I believe that the laws are a reaction towards a problem, but the most effective way to prevent the problem is to spread skills that will empower the population to be protected in this environment. So one of my doubts is whether that intention that was manifested in the legislative action in 2022 will translate in, for instance, study plans at different levels, not only university. In fact, I believe, and many researchers believe as well, that media literacy should be implemented from very early stages. So one of the things I would like to see is whether that is implemented in Spain and in the Southern Europe region in effective actions. The Spanish presidency of the European Union last semester coincided as well with the first world regulation on artificial intelligence that was issued by the European Union. And here I have mixed feelings because I think it's good that we tackle this, and I'm happy that Spain played a role there, even if it was just coincidental because of the presidency. The regulation said that the aim was to foster an inclusive, sustainable, and citizen-oriented AI, which is all very good, but then we have to go down to the specifics. Spain has also a national strategy of artificial intelligence, but I think we're playing by ear here. And one of the things that that resonated more in the interventions before, that I've heard in several participants, but Rafael specifically said that there's a need to increase the pedagogy about the technological developments, because most of the time it's that people don't understand, and I fear that might be where we are now, and this can be one of the keys to explain why mistrust is spreading beyond the natural borders of this information. It's just a mistrust towards everything that operates in the internet.
Thank you, Roberto. Teresa?
I think there's a very interesting case study we can look at when we're thinking about, for example, the specific issue of disinformation and state-sponsored disinformation in particular, which is Ukraine. Obviously, the beginning of the war in Ukraine, there was a massive information operation from Russia, and miraculously, Ukraine has handled that quite well. But it wasn't just something that that happened by chance, but it exactly was a consequence of years long of resilience training of the wider society within Ukraine. So part of that was establishing official communication channels which were trusted, but weren't just limited to traditional media. For example, establishing a Telegram channel which reaches the people on the medium that they want to use. For example, the UK government also did something interesting in the very early stages of that war, which was being very transparent about otherwise quite secret intelligence information, being very transparent about troop movements. And one of the first times ever, the Ministry of Defense in the UK has started to put out on Twitter, back then Twitter, intelligence briefings for the general public so that they could keep track of developments. And that Twitter feed was incredibly successful. I think it was one of the most successful public information campaigns in the past couple of years. And that was a lesson learned from the pandemic, that it's better to be early and direct and transparent, and to help people get through a time of uncertainty in a proactive way. And these are the two case studies which I can think of, which were quite successful and which maybe are useful to draw lessons further down the line.
Thank you, Teresa. And actually, I would just like actually to add on what Teresa have said, that I fully agree. The role that DCN had actually in contributing in the build-up of this resilience, because we have been in Ukraine before the invasion, and we have actually worked with the Ukrainian civil society through a hub that we have inaugurated there, while immediately after the invasion we have launched a campaign called Humans for Ukraine that attracted a lot of attention for mainstream media, and contributed actually in the use of in having this network readiness, I would call it, in order to connect it with our today's event. Having said that, I would like now to ask Purple and Roberto as well, in your opinion, what are the primary responsibilities of governments, tech companies, and individuals in fostering and upholding trust in a network society? Purple?
I think these three different stakeholders should further collaborate and work together to counter misinformation, and more than that, actually mainstream media literacy. The thing is, the government, I would not say all, but some government officials actually sow distrust towards other institutions like the media, which further contributed to the breakdown of trust altogether in the overall society. So when you have state leaders calling the media as the enemy and as the purveyor of fake news, then it will be really, really hard for the general public to trust the media in itself. I'm not saying the media is faultless. It's definitely not. But if you paint them as, against an institution that you cannot trust, then it's really hard to encourage people to try to educate themselves using the media. So instead of fighting them, and instead of sowing distrust against them, it would be good if governments can work with them. But having said that, it should be done in cognizance of the fact that the public in itself and the media in itself are very wary of the governments using their power to create regulations. We're talking about regulatory frameworks here. We're very wary of governments creating regulations where they can define what is fake news, quote unquote, and what is not, because they can weaponize it against their critics. And this has happened a lot from my own country in the Philippines, from mainland China. And you have governments developing and implementing these laws, like say India and Indonesia, where they have some critics have already said that they have been used against journalists themselves. So I would say that you have to build trust among all of these three first, so that they can actually do something to, again, create an environment of trust and help contribute to confidence building measures. Otherwise, everything I would say will remain as a sadly as a pipe dream. So yeah, create trust among themselves and then work together. And then instead of just having these fact-checking measures per se, you have to marry them with media literacy, like put resources on educating the people how to use technology to produce something that's actually that could actually benefit all members of society, and ideally those that need technology the most.
Roberto, thank you, Roberto.
Well, this is interesting because I think the answer, maybe I'm just too close to to my line of research, but I think the answer to how to empower what each actor has to do to empower trust in a network society is pretty much the same as for how to face a problem like disinformation. And I think all the actors that you mentioned are definitely involved in the problem, either as a victim or potential victim, or even creators of disinformation or regulators of how to fight disinformation. And when problems become so big, I have the feeling that the individual responsibility tends to blur. And what's crucial here is that everyone do their part. Personal individuals that are not only recipients of this information, they don't not only receive it, but they also disseminate it, should be aware of the potential harm that those actions can have. I remember quite recently, my very admired Professor Jeff Jarvis had an intervention in the Senate, in the American Senate, on AI and the future of journalism. And he said the technological actors do have to play a role, but ultimately it's an individual responsibility. If someone posts something that's disinforming, he should remain accountable. The same can be applied to these technological instances. We can discuss whether the social networks, the platforms, should do more or less, but obviously they do have to play a role. And when, especially in a time when deepfakes can be perfected to such an extent as we know today, maybe they should not pre-hunt or pre-verify the contents, but when they know that there's fake contents in their networks, they should do everything that's in their hand to take them down. And the same goes for governments. I mean, they need to legislate with an aim at putting something on their part to solve the problem. And I think in their case, the more than the restrictions, I totally agree with Purple. Then restrictions. I'm reluctant to accept them because I know how history has taught us that works in terms of freedom of expression. Restrictions, once they're introduced, are really difficult to remove. So more than introducing restrictions on what to do on the internet, their actions should be focused specifically on empowering a critical mind, empowering and media literacy in the population. Because if we are to ask people to remain accountable for what they do online, we need to make them informed people that know exactly what their actions are, and also what they can expect, and how can they thrive in the online environment. So I think there should be a commitment on all the actors, but I think it's even more important that we all remember that each one of us in the online environment are responsible for what we do, and we should do our part to make this as efficient as possible.
Thank you, Roberto, because actually now it is important now to move in a very interesting angle, which is, and this question addresses to Alexandra and Raphael, how actually does the concept of trust intersect with privacy concerns? Roberto, as well as Purple, mentioned things about privacy in the digital age, and what steps can be taken in order to be able to strike a balance between technological innovation and privacy protection. Alexandra and then Raphael.
Thanks, Nikos. Yes, one thing that I think it's very important to address here that being said before is that people that don't trust generally is that one that have never tried technology itself. It's out of the system. Once you start to use it, it's even the most dangerous thing is to be so naive and use without being so concerned about the ethical consequences. And in this aspect, the privacy and the trust has to do with, because we are here talking among specialists, but the AI very basic data and AI concepts of a kind of literacy, or the basic concepts that we need to understand how a AI system work and how our data is circulating within the systems, it's really far from the regular population. These concepts are, people don't understand how our data is being used online, and it's far from understanding it. So when we talk about media literacy, it's very important for me, and I don't consider there are two different fields. I think when we develop skills to build up trust in technology and to protect ourselves for disinformation, we have at the same time to develop skills to deal with our personal information, and to understand how information is the fuel of this the economical system and the digital system nowadays. And this concept is really far from reality. It's very common for us to talk about it, but it's far from the school based. And in this sense, Nikos, regulation must be part of that. There's not a way that regulation is not part of it. We need to regulate this practice, and I think that Europe has done the first very important step when regulate the personal data years ago, and some continents and other countries rely on that and make similar bills of that one. But now this build needs to change all the time, because AI systems is sophisticated the way they use our data, and the gatekeepers needs to be refreshed about what they can do and they cannot do with the data. So trust needs, it's related with this, because we are at the same time we need to trust a system that we know what it is doing with our personal, with our data, with our information, with our behavior behind the screen, because data is behavior. It's a behavior aspect nowadays, it's not a number anymore. So awareness, it's a good word for those who don't know anything about. We need actually to start knowing that we are dealing with an AI system, for example. This is the first step with the first ground zero AI regulations in the world. But At the same time, it's been hard to detect and to define what AI is, because it's a blur area between coding, simple and simple coding and recursive AI systems. So there is decision trees and things in the middle that mix it up, this environment a little bit. So it's an important thing to think about it, because in a way, digital rights, intellectual property, it's been one of the points that it's guiding this kind of regulation around the world, and one of the most complicated points that we need to deal with. And at least I think we are, in both cases, in trust and using of digital and personal data, we are dealing with reinvent or recreate or redefine what are the commons in the digital world, because the commons in our physical worlds we define as something that it's public domain, where it's a square and we can go and what is there, it's from everyone. But the commons in the digital world is very mixed up with private, with governmental, with a personal one. What's a common? What's a digital common for us? And this is what we need to go forward on.
Thank you, Alexander. Rafael, regarding privacy concerns, privacy rights, and trust in technology, as well as actually developments.
Yes, Nikos. So I agree with many of the points Alexander just mentioned. The first one, I think, is to have a robust privacy protection regulation. I mean, this sounds like rhetoric, but this is important. And this is something that has to do, of course, in a way that's democratically produced. So this should be something that enhances transparency as well and the use of this data. And it's ever changing. This is something that will have to be moving along. But of course, there's also the private usage of this, or the awareness rather of this whole data sharing and data privacy of your own management of your data. There's the need for this promotion for ethical use of the technological practices surrounding the use of data, because of course we know we can have all regulations and all the best wishes, but if the ethics it's not behind this, then it becomes a problem. And this again is why I keep saying this rhetoric. It's important to mention that this is at some point complicated, but enhancing digital awareness and digital literacy is something that needs to be behind these points for both the individuals that will be outlining regulations and for those that will be sharing their information online, for them to have some sort of guidelines on what could be shareable or could not. I mean, we all know some relative that has overshared and has been either hacked or lost some money. From the tiniest of things, because of a lack of information is the truth. Even though some of the regulations to protect data and privacy are there. So I think that trying developing this type of knowledge networks to encourage these practices in the best ways, public-private connections to teach, if you're a corporation like a banking corporation or finance and whatnot, that they have their own ways of teaching individuals how to manage their own information, etc. So those are little examples on how to do this. And of course, the investment in secure technologies that will be behind all these processes, because we can understand how these things work and how the regulations apply and whatnot. But if we don't have the technologies essential to do this type of protection and management, then none of this works. So that is, I think, the short answer to this question.
Thank you, Rafael. Now we'll pass it over to Bill. Bill, taking into account initiatives like the Network Readiness Index, but also your experience from the Internet Society, how it can contribute in developing practical strategies in order to enhance trust in technology, but also how it can be used at the policy level, such as to adopt relevant strategies. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think indicators like the Network Readiness Index or cyber maturity scores and so forth are valuable because a nation can somehow place themselves in a larger context and see where they need maybe additional development of policy. I mean, most of these indexes are not an index of one indicator. They're actually capture many aspects, and therefore they can identify areas of weakness and strength. So I think it can be good. But you know, these indices are one example of where research can help. And but I think more broadly, we need empirical research that examines all of these assumptions about government and about regulation and, you know, distrust regulation, distrust government, distrust companies. We should be skeptical all the time and insist on better research of case studies and research on exactly what is the outcome of particular developments, particular technological tracks, and will initiatives of a country make a difference in its network readiness over time. We need a long-term perspective and also an empirical anchor to our assumptions about what to do. Anyway.
And I would add actually to that a broader coalition like the one that actually offering today's webinar and actually discussion that collects global responses and opinions. As we reach the end of this webinar, I would like now to ask the final question, which is, I would say it might be a $1 million question related with the Network Readiness Index. Looking ahead, what are the emerging technologies or trends that do you foresee as potential game changers that will reinforce or reshape trust dynamics? I will start from Teresa and then go to Purple. Teresa?
$1 million question indeed. I would say there's a dynamic which, when we're talking about generative AI, we might not have touched on, which is the way we interact with technology is going to fundamentally change in the next couple of years. Complicated user interfaces are, thank God, going to die out because you will be able to talk to your computer. You will be able to say to your computer, hey, can you please put the slideshow up so that the audience on Zoom can see them, and the computer will understand that by using natural language processing, and you will be able to express what you want and get that from technology out. And I think that is going to revolutionize, first of all, access. It's going to unleash creativity in the way people use technology for good and for bad, both things. And it will create new governance issues because if it's very easy to create code and applications, of course, they can be used for good and they can be used for bad. We've already seen that in the past couple of months. There have been increasingly very harmful pictures on the internet to an extent and to a quality that just wasn't there before. And we're seeing this playing out in the conflicts in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. So I think we need to really reap those benefits and use this technology for the inclusion of a wider society in the technological landscape while mitigating those risks. But I think really what's going to change the world a little bit is this issue of user interfaces and people being able to talk to computers in human language.
Thank you. Purple?
Now, taking off from what Teresa said, I would say it's also generative AI, but in a very particular context. Here in Asia, we've seen two elections already. Bangladesh, and then you have Taiwan recently ended. and then you'll have the elections in Indonesia, in India, and then so here we've seen deep fakes being reproduced, and actually cheap fakes and then deep fakes which are really crudely done, but I think are enough to deceive voters, unfortunately. And these deepfakes are being produced to reinforce certain stereotypes or to depict candidates and political parties in a certain way. So if you're using generative AI to influence a very important critical institution such as the elections, you can only think of how from here, different parts of the world, if you have cheap fakes being done now, it will only become more sophisticated as we go on, and it will become more pervasive. Aside from the elections, we are also seeing deep fakes being created to mimic journalists ourselves, so that journalists will promote or will be used to promote crypto scams. And we have real life harms here. We have people who are trusting journalists who actually try these investment schemes who turn out to be scams. And I'm telling you, again, these cheap fakes are crudely done, but people are already believing them. And when I say pervasive, this may sound very silly to you or trivial, but some countries here are deeply rooted on religious beliefs and practices. And there are some deepfakes being done to already trick the faithful into doing something that is not always helpful to others who don't believe in the same way. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Purple.
Okay, so I think to answer your question, generative AI and its evolution, if it becomes more sophisticated, easier to use, easier to access, and the more it becomes pervasive, the more it will affect and reshape trust in societies.
Thank you. Roberto?
I agree with what's been said. I feel that in the history of technology, we've also have been thrilled about the new things that technology allowed us to do. And almost immediately after, simultaneously, we feared what that technology in the wrong hands could do as well. And I think the bottom line is always the same. The problem is not technology. The problem is what we do with it. And it's very easy to blame, in the case of disinformation, it's very easy to blame technology for allowing us to falsify reality to the point of not being able to decipher what's real and what's not. But the problem lies rather behind. I remember in one of the researches that we did in the early stages of our work on disinformation, we conducted several focus groups, and some of the disinforming contents were like probably saying before, there were cheap fakes, there were obvious, blatant disinforming contents, and we asked some of the participants why they were disseminating those contents when they knew they were false, and they simply said because it was fun. And I think there was a lot of information in that answer, because that also carries the not being conscious of the harm, possibly because it's not something immediate, it's not something that you see. And that's why it's important to empower people by teaching them about what technology can do and what you can do with technology, because if we ignore those things, if there's a distance between what we can do and the impact of what we can do in having society, then it will be easier to do it. I'm not saying that will stop happening when people are more literate, they're better informed, but I think that's definitely something that we should try in full mode and see how we can make the most of technology without fearing so much those results, because as Professor Jarvis also said in the Senate, I mean, when the printing press came along, people wanted to restrict the owners of those printing presses and believe the technology was to blame. when radio introduced simultaneity, the press complained because that was an unfair competition, so we should restrict what technology could do. The point Professor Jarvis was making is, are we living similar things with artificial intelligence today? And I think that comes back to the initial point I was trying to make. It's not about technology. Technology is allowing us to do more things. And it means that as mankind, we're growing smarter. We can do things that we couldn't do before. But we need to be aware of our human nature. And our human nature is able to do all those things that make us progress. But it's also able to use it for the wrong purposes. So just fighting for a more informed and empowered society will limit the amount of misuses of technologies. Blaming it on the technology, it's just the easy shortcut, but it won't solve anything, and it will make us more ignorant.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. Alexander?
Yes, I will change my answer in the last minute because I don't want to repeat. But I think there is one field that is very important to pay attention with is that when AI generative systems meet health, public health, we are public. The health system, it's being of course, is being related a lot with the human interface between a doctor and a person, and historically is like that, and we used to feel safer like this, and we are already seeing a lot of different use of AI in the health system. That's very important, and it will be very important for the development of cancer diagnostic and this kind of thing, and also in the first layer of attending people in a hospital, for example, using an AI system to make the first selection of patients. And what's for me scaring a little bit, I was in a roundtable here in Brazil in December with one of I think the most important Brazilian doctor around the world, and he's really known worldwide about, and he's brilliant, but he was really skeptic about the use of AI in treating and amplifying the public health system in Brazil as a good thing, which I think this is a kind of trust issue as well. We need to check it out, how health. And there is one aspect of health, it's with bio and nanotechnology. This is one aspect. I'm not talking about this at this time, and big data, which I think is very important to pay attention. But I'm paying attention how AI can improve and make a public health system really a universal universal common for the humanity. And I think we need to think about it. Just I switch a little bit my answer because I like to put this issue specific of health, because we didn't touch it here. And when we talk about trust and technology, we must address health as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Bill?
Yeah, I'm more optimistic than I think most of the panel, but I think the major first of all, I think many of these issues about technology and society are enduring and just have been consistent over the years. But I think what is different now is the degree to which the internet and social media and now AI are enabling ordinary individuals to be empowered more than ever before. And that we are I think it's important enough. The last book I wrote is called The Fifth Estate, which I talk about the fact that networked individuals are becoming a major source of accountability in liberal democratic societies, and are still important in even autocratic societies in the sense that they can get access to information that they never could before. So I think we have to, I mean, everything that was said about how we have to educate people to be responsible users of technology are even more important. because the ordinary individual is a new source of power in society, equivalent to journalism in an earlier era, because it can hold other institutions, including the journalists, accountable, and health professionals accountable, and government accountable. So it's I think that's all good news. But if we don't trust people, then you're in deep trouble. Right? but I think we should, because people also are the best regulators of other people. When people say stupid things online, people come on and say, no, that's not true. No, that's not the case. You haven't read this. You don't know that. So the fifth estate is a self-regulating mechanism as well. Thank you.
Okay. Bob's book is an excellent book. Despite that, I consider really important the role of regulatory bodies that can complement actually what Bob highlights there, an empowered actually individual due to technology. I would like now to finish our question series and today's discussion, if there's not any other question from the audience, with Rafael. Rafael, just a short comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do the shortest one, and I think it kind of merges everyone's idea here. I think that the one thing that is going to be a game changer here, it's a little bit more of a midterm, long term, but it will eventually be something that merges this AI with some sort of hardware. So we've seen it in every science fiction book, movie, or whatnot, and it's going to be this facilitator between the human capacity and the AI capacity, either in the form of a droid, either in the form of a computer, or either in the form of something like this thing that we trust, even though we shouldn't, unconditionally. And I think that is going to be the game changer, because again, that will be able to identify deep fakes, fake news, provide you the real data or the most appropriate data, and it will bring things into the forefront, like the NRI, which in my humble opinion, in my humble view, is bridging this hard, dark, black box of research and innovation technology and human capital back into the world in some sort of almost pop culture way. So it's easy to read, it's easy to understand. And in the future, I foresee again that one of the big changes is going to be this hardware that is going to bridge these two things and will give a face to this technology that we will eventually begin trusting. So with that, I will close my remarks for today.
Thank you very much, Rafael. I would like actually to discuss. Okay, there was some comments. I would like actually to thank all of our speakers. I would like to thank Rafael and Portulans Institute for a great presentation as well, and for the cooperation that we have all these years. I would also like to thank Mariana, Sylvie, and Miriam that contributed, and Joanna as well, that contributed in actually forming up and setting up this very interesting, I would say, webinar. All of us have attended various webinars, but this one has been an exceptional. You allow me to say that, not because I'm influenced from the fact that I am the moderator, but I really enjoyed the discussion. I wish we had more time, but hopefully we will find the real place to meet all together and continue our discussion. Thank you very much, all of you, that you stayed till the very last minute, that it is actually an acknowledgement of the interest that this discussion, and especially the wonderful speakers, had. I would like to thank you very much for being with us. Have a nice day, whatever time zone you are, because we are all represented here.